Hi, it's Bea with Crafting Daily Dose, and today I'm going to be making this 7-panel faux quilt card. Now, I've shared these before, but today I'm going to be starting out with just a single sheet of designer series paper rather than a mix of them. So I'm going to show you how to take that single sheet and cut it into these different panels so that they'll fit nicely together. Now, this is one of those projects that actually takes longer to explain than it does to do. Once you sit down to make it for yourself, you'll see that it goes pretty quick, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Here are all the pieces that I'm going to be using for this card, and you can find a link to the supplies in the description box below. So the card base is Pear Pizzazz cardstock, and it is 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches, scored down the middle at 4 1/4 inches. I've got 2 pieces of old olive cardstock for the layers, one for the inside and one for the outside. Both of them are going to be 4 inches across by 5 1/4 inches in height. And then I have a piece of basic white cardstock for the message panel on the inside. This one is 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. And of course, we have our all-important piece of Dainty Flowers Designer Series paper. This is one of the free selections during Sale-a-bration through the end of February 2023, or while supplies last. So I have cut a piece from it that is 3 13/16 by 5 inches. That measurement is just a little bit fussy because we've got that extra 1/16 of an inch, but we are going to go step by step through cutting this piece together. Now I have another piece here that is 2 9/16 of an inch by 1 1/4 inches. So this one is just a tiny bit more than 2.5 inches in width. Let me show you where these pieces came from. So the paper originally looks like this. It started out as 12 inches across by 12 inches in height, and there's this beautiful scenery along the bottom edge and along the top edge. So when you cut this out, you can get 6 cards of this design from 1 sheet of paper. And so this section comes just from here, and it's starting out from along the bottom, so it's 5 inches this way. But notice that there's a lot of plain area here. That's where this piece came from. Now, you're not going to have quite enough for you to be able to get 2 of those plain sections from this area. So if you were to be making 2 cards from here, one from the top and one from the bottom, you have this plain section in the middle, and you can choose to use it for one of your cards. Now, what about the other one if you choose to make it again? Another option that you have is that you're going to end up with a piece that we would normally discard. And instead of discarding it, I just flipped it over to the other side, which is this beautiful patterned old olive, and I heat embossed my sentiment there in white. So that's another option. Or of course, you could also substitute just plain basic white cardstock for this piece. And then I just have a little bit of embellishment for this card. I'm going to be using some of these brushed brass butterflies. And those are the pieces that you'll need. Don't forget, you'll also want to select out a sentiment. The one that I'm using is You Fill My Day with Happiness from the Cheerful Basket stamp set. Now, a big part of making this card is cutting that designer series paper, and we're going to do that together in just a minute. But because we're going to be turning the paper in all different directions, I want to make sure that you have an overview. So we start out with one big piece, and we're going to cut a strip off from the bottom. That strip gets divided into 2 pieces. So then we're left with this. Next, we cut off a vertical strip and divide that into 2 pieces. From the remaining piece of paper, we'll cut off another strip from the bottom, which you may choose to use or substitute with something else. Then we've got this piece here. From that, we're going to trim off a little 1/16 of an inch from the right-hand edge, and then finally, from the piece that remains, we're going to split that in half to form these 2 panels right here. Now, when you take a look at the card, you're going to notice that in the top sections, there are these 2 spacers between the panels, but on the bottom, there's only 1 spacer for each of those areas. Because of that difference, These horizontal rectangles are going to be just a little bit wider, specifically 1/16 of an inch wider, to make up the difference so that the gaps in between the pieces are going to be the same. So that's the reason for the 1/16 of an inch measurements that we'll be using. Here's the piece that we're starting with. I'm going to turn it clockwise so that I'm cutting from the bottom edge here, and I'm cutting off 1 1/4 inches. So here's my measurement. Now this piece is going to be divided into 2 separate pieces. I'm going to place this at 2 9/16. So to find that, I find my 2.5 inch mark, and then I go over to the left by just 1 little tick mark. So now I'm at 2 9/16. And on my other side, if I'm looking at the measurements on the right hand side, I am at 1 1/4 inches. And I'll go ahead and cut that. Now from the piece that's left over, I'm cutting off that vertical strip. So I'm putting this at 1 1/4 inches. And from here, I'm going to cut a square off from the top. So turning it counterclockwise and putting it at 1 1/4 inches again. The other piece that I get down here is 2.5 inches in height. Now from this piece, another 1 1/4 inches from the bottom, so turning it clockwise. And this is the piece that I can either discard or turn it over to the other side, and I can go ahead and heat emboss my sentiment on that if I'm not using a separate piece. I'm going to set that aside. For now, I'm interested in this piece here, and I want to trim off the extra 1/16 of an inch from the right-hand side. So in order to do this, I'm going to lay it down on my trimmer, and 1/16 of an inch is actually right at the border between the brown and the white. So I'm putting it right there where the white begins. And when you're cutting such a small piece, you don't want to start your blade at the bottom or at the top because it's going to meet a lot of resistance, and that's when your paper tends to crinkle up or tear on you. So instead, I'm going to take my cutting blade and I'm just going to start anywhere in the middle. I'm going to press down, and you can hear it going down into the paper. From there, I'll move up and down till I make my cut. So that's a way that you can get a really nice clean cut even on a small piece. The piece that I'm left with now is this square, and I'm going to divide it in half. So here's the top, here's the bottom. I'm going to place it at 1 1/4 inches, and I can check myself looking at the measurements on the other side, on the right hand side, that is also at 1 1/4 inches because we're dividing in half. So this is what we have. And then if I'm using a separate piece of designer series paper, it's going to go right into this spot. I'm bringing in my silicone craft sheet so that I have a little bit of extra cushion underneath my paper since I'm stamping with a clear photopolymer stamp. I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black ink for this sentiment. I'm going to be using the multi-purpose glue to adhere our panels onto the old olive cardstock layer. I'm first going to do a dry fit just to make sure it looks like everything's going to go together well. If I made a mistake in my cutting, I still have a chance to adjust things before they get glued down. I like to start with the corner pieces and get them glued down first. You want to be careful not to use too much glue because with the designer series paper, if you've got too much, sometimes that can cause some bubbling. If you accidentally get too much on there, use a little scrap of cardstock as a little squeegee to even that out. And I'm going to place this down. I want to leave about a 1/16 of an inch gap along the top and the sides. So at the risk of getting everything falling off my card here, I'm just going to show you what that 1/16 of an inch looks like. Just want to try to get that as even as I can. And because I'm using glue, I have a little bit of time to make adjustments if I need to. I've got one corner down. I'm going to go ahead and do the other corners next and then sort of fit in the remaining pieces within that space. Now that I've got the corners down, I'm going to take this piece, which is going to be in the middle between the two of them, and so now I have a reference point on either side, and I can just center this horizontally within that space. And then the same thing for the remaining two pieces. Now, this is handmade, so don't expect it to be perfect, but hopefully these tips will help you get a good result. So here are my panels adhered to that layer. Now we'll put the rest of the card together, and for that I'll use my Stampin' Seal tape runner. I always like to flip and make sure that I've got my card oriented the right way. Now to finish off the card, I'll add a few butterflies. There's our finished card. Now, once you get the hang of making those cuts, it actually goes really quickly, and it's a great way to showcase this beautiful paper. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this dose of creativity. If you get a chance to make the project, I would love to see it, so share it in my Facebook group or tag me if you're sharing elsewhere. You can find all my links below. I hope to craft with you again next time, and until then, have a great day.